Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Hilary Abel, and I'm the co-founder of Project Equity, and I am just delighted to welcome, looks like about 100 people to our webinar this morning here in California, where I'm speaking to you from. We're here today to talk about participatory management, and as you can see, we are calling it Your Key to Business Success. So with no further ado, I'd love to just make a brief introduction to our topic before welcoming our presenters, Denise Hernández of Cooperative Home Care Associates, Blake Jones of Namaste Solar, and Lin Chang Liu of Praxis Consulting Group. Participatory management is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I have worked in cooperative businesses at a company called Equal Exchange, in many nonprofit organizations, including Project Equity, and with many employee-owned companies through my work at Project Equity and elsewhere. And I found that participatory management is something that many of us have experienced, and I personally have experienced both as an employee and as a manager in various organizations. And it's something that we don't talk about very much. So Project Equity was interested in promoting a conversation about participatory management in the small business community, and also in the employee ownership community where we do our work. So Project Equity is, as I said, a nonprofit organization, and our work is with small business owners and with employee-owned companies and the employees who work in them. And the work that we do is helping businesses transition to become employee-owned and to be thriving companies, and to help employees and employee owners thrive in those companies. So part of that work is involved with how companies are managed. And we believe that participatory management is an approach that is working in many organizations and could work in many more. We all know that, have heard the old adage that people don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses. So even the word boss has a negative tone. The idea of management often gets a bad rap because there's a lot of not very well done management out there. And there's actually some data that suggests that most people are not naturally born good managers, but many people can learn to be good managers. And so our conversation about participatory management is really about, in organizations that have people with management responsibility, how can they in that role, and how can everyone who works together in that company bring out the best in the whole team, in the whole organization. So we believe that management, when it's done in a way that's truly participatory and empowering of employees, and people throughout the company are fully engaged, that it helps companies achieve their missions and create quality jobs for everyone involved, and help to change the world, as many of the companies that we work with do. So when we talk about participatory management, what I mean by that is it's both a management philosophy and an approach to management in which employees at all levels of an organization are engaged in planning and decision-making to optimize organizational effectiveness. And Project Equity published a paper a few months ago called Participatory Management: An Overview and Case Study of High Involvement Cultures at Work. And it's available on our website. And it discusses kind of the general approach of what it means to work in a participatory way, some best practices and things to keep in mind to do participatory management well, and also a great case study of New Belgium Brewing Company, which is a wonderful employee-owned company out of Fort Collins, Colorado. They're also a benefit corporation, a B Corp, and a much-loved beer producer. And the case study talks about some of their practices of participatory management, like in-depth onboarding, rituals, and appreciation. All of us would love to have their free trip to Belgium the beer tour of Belgium after you complete 5 years of service. How they do participatory planning, open book management, how employee ownership fits in for them, and how they talk about managers as coaches in their company. It's the farthest away from the command and control approach to supervision that some of us have heard about with the bad bosses I mentioned before. It's a coaching approach, which is actually what our first presenter today is going to be talking about. So I encourage you to check out our very short paper on participatory management. I'm eager to have Denise start us off with her presentation. So Denise Hernández is a longtime employee of Cooperative Home Care Associates, and she'll tell you a little bit more about Cooperative Home Care. It's a company that I have long admired and learned so much from, and many of us I know feel the same way. The coaching approach is part of their philosophy and their practice of decades now, and she'll be talking in detail about that. Then we'll be able to switch over to Blake Jones, who's a co-founder of Namaste Solar. Namaste is a company that many who are familiar with the solar industry and also with employee ownership have heard of because of their leadership position in both of those fields. And they're particularly known for their big picture meetings and the very highly engaged culture that they have and their practices of employee ownership that Blake will be able to speak to. And finally, Lin Shang Lu is a principal at Praxis Consulting Group, a wonderful company out in Philadelphia that does work with employee-owned companies and amazing work in leadership development. And Lin Shang will be talking with us about participatory management across some of the companies that they've worked with. And Denise Hernández, I'm happy to welcome you to the webinar.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Hillary and Project Equity, for inviting me to participate in today's webinar, and thank you to everyone that's attending today. Today, I'm going to be covering a couple of things. Many of you may know about coaching, have heard about coaching. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the coaching skills are. I'm also going to share some benefits of using the coaching approach and how we introduce coaching here at CHCA. As Hillary mentioned, it's been over a decade now that we've been using this. We actually implemented the coaching approach in 2007. So we've been, kind of embedded coaching into our organizational culture here. I'm also going to share some positive outcomes that we've had at CHCA and some personal stories of how coaching has impacted some of our workers here. I know that some of you know who CHCA is and some of you may not have heard about us, but I wanted to talk just a bit about CHCA. We're a licensed home care agency located in the South Bronx. We've been operating since 1985. We provide home care service. We have home care workers that work out in the member's home and provide services to elderly, the people that suffer from chronic diseases, and people with disabilities in their homes. We're the largest worker cooperative in the U.S., and each year we have a training on site. Each year we train and then later employ 600 people from the community. And currently we have a workforce of over 2,300 people. So what is the coaching approach? The coaching is a set of communication skills that involves several things. It's really designed to build relationships. And how do we build the relationships? We build the relationships by listening to folks, by checking in with workers, displaying empathy when people are frustrated or, have something going on for themselves, indicating belief in people that they have the ability to do their job, and also being clear and direct when challenges arise with their performance, because it's coaching is supportive, but there's also an accountability level to coaching too. Coaching is also about engaging others in problem solving. So rather than having a supervisor tell a worker, what you did wrong or this is the solution that you have to put in place, with coaching, you kind of invite the worker to come up with solutions, and hopefully this is going to make the worker more vested in ensuring that those solutions are implemented. And I think one of the hardest skills of all that's included in coaching is self-management. A lot of people, when we get into conversations, we have our own perspective, and they feel that their perspective is the correct one, is the right one. In coaching, we have to acknowledge the other person's perspective, pull back when we're emotionally triggered, and not make assumptions. Those are probably, from our experience here, one of the hardest, or a couple of the hardest skills to put into practice. And lastly, coaching could be about providing constructive feedback. So that's an introduction to coaching. And this next slide, you see, I've kind of written out what are the benefits to coaching. we talked a little bit about the relationships and the problem solving, and you're going to hear more about these benefits when I illustrate some of the, and I share some of the personal stories at the end. Okay? All right, so how did we introduce coaching? In 2007, the leadership here at CHCA got together and they attended a 2-day coaching, introduction to coaching. After they attended the 2-day coaching, there was a lot of talk about bringing it back here to the office staff. And there was some resistance with some people because we were kind of afraid of some concerns that if we introduced it here, how were we going to sustain it? And I think, you know, that was like the challenge about sustaining this. But we got through this, and because we felt like the potential benefit of this was more important, and we would figure out the logistics later. That same year, into 2008, the leadership continued to go to different trainings, like intermediate and advanced, like delving deeper into the coaching skills. And then we decided that our HR staff were going to attend a train-the-trainer session to learn the content and then bring it back to CHCA and teach the following people. We started off by saying, okay, we're going to teach the supervisors, because anybody that has any direct manage or direct contact with our home care workers, since they work out in the fields, that could have been our nurses, our coordinators, our case managers, they're going to, you know, go through this training program. After we did the supervisors, we said, hey, these are a set of communication skills that anyone within the organization can use. So we went back with the help of the consultant, which was Paraprofessional Healthcare Institute, PHI, and we kind of worked around the content, and we started delivering a peer-to-peer coaching class, 2-day coaching class, which involved our receptionists, our compliance, and our maintenance staff. Everyone else that wasn't considered a supervisor had to go through this 2-day coaching class. And for the home care workers, the people out in the fields, when they come to CHCA, they have to go through a 4-week training program. There was a coaching piece embedded into one of those days, which coaching skills are also covered with our home care workers, so they can go out to the field and, you know, share those skills, particularly when they work with the clients and with each other. So after doing all this work, we said, how do we keep, everyone was trained, everyone within the organization was trained. We said, how do we keep this alive? We formed the Coaching Sustainability Committee, and they were tasked with how do we keep the coaching movement alive at CHCA. And since this was new to us, we had some help from PHI sitting into the meetings, and we had management. Later on, that evolved too. We said we need to get our frontline staff, our office staff in here also, sitting into this committee, because they see what goes on the day-to-day here, and they deal a lot with, like, the home care workers coming in. So who more better than to have on this committee than, you know, some of our office staff. And they came up with the following. They came up with ideas of providing coaching certificates, which at quarterly meetings, all staff meetings, if you were to see something throughout the quarter, like someone using the coaching skills, you can name that person to provide that person with a certificate at the all staff meeting, and talk about why you provided that person with a certificate, and, you know, what skills did they use, and what was the impact, or what was the outcome. So people really loved to go to those meetings and hear, you know, who was going to get a certificate and hear about the story. And the people that received the certificates were even more excited. Then we said everyone went through a 2-day coaching class. What do we do next? We decided we were going to implement booster sessions. Booster sessions are done twice a year, and they're a 3-hour session, so they're not as long as the original 2-day. But what they do is they reinforce the skills that people initially learned about in the coaching, the 2-day coaching seminar. So people don't forget the skills, and they go and they practice it. So we pick 1 or 2 skills, and that's what we focus on. And the people from the Coaching Sustainability Committee are the people that develop the curriculum, develop the material, and then co-facilitate. So we even had, like, office staff members coming, working with the management here, with the supervisors, creating that material and then co-facilitating that to the rest of the staff. We also included coaching in our performance appraisals. So everyone gets kind of evaluated. Are they pulling back enough? Are they practicing their active listening enough? How well do they receive feedback? So if there's areas of improvement, the performance eval is an opportunity to provide that feedback as well to that employee. And HR still continues to provide the 2-day coaching classes to all new staff that are hired. So this is still a practice that we do until now. So this was something that was kind of thought about like 10 years ago, and we're still doing this. I just wanted to give you like a little example. We did a coaching class booster session. Why does your intention have an impact on me? And we wanted to recognize, these are our office staff. We wanted to do like we have a TV here where we put news, and we put this little slide on the TV just recognizing their commitment and, their level of preparedness when it came to developing this material and giving the class. These are little things, these are little knickknacks as you see them that we give out after the coaching class so that people can remember what was the theme of the class. If you see here, we have embracing the differences allows us to succeed with greater style. That was a personality booster session that we gave. And this little cube here has the 4 conflict styles that we talk about also in our booster sessions of competing, accommodating, avoiding, and collaborating, and how sometimes those conflict styles can help, or if it's somebody's too competing, can help the communication. Very quickly too, positive outcomes for us for CHCA is that with all these classes, people have a common vocabulary across the organization. So it's great when you hear people saying, I was triggered, but I used my pullback skills, or I had to paraphrase so I can make sure that I understood what the person is saying. It's great when you hear the office staff saying, and it's even a better feeling when we hear our home care workers coming from the field to share this with us. We've seen development of staff and engagement of staff, development in that we've had people that maybe make so many assumptions and don't ask enough questions, and after going through these classes and these booster sessions, we see a shift. We see them trying to really pull back and understand where the other person's coming from or where the other employee is coming from, and try to refrain from making so many assumptions. We see engagement. We designed the booster sessions so that they're interactive. So people like to share their stories, and then other people learn from those stories. And as I mentioned before, we have the co-facilitators, which design and co-facilitate too. So it's a learning, across the board for everyone. And we've seen it in our leadership team where we have so many meetings, we have so many difficult conversations in those meetings sometimes for day-to-day operations. And these skills have really helped us come and diffuse some conflicts that we've had and cultivate really strong relationships. And, CHCA has always been forming the foundation where we respect, here it's important to respect our workers, show dignity, and we're creating jobs for low-income people. And this coaching has only helped us strengthen those values and beliefs, and and have had an impact on the retention of the workers. So just to finish off, I wanted to share 3 stories. Jessie is a coordinator at CHCA, and she was one of those people that have had challenges in really stopping to make not making assumptions and asking open-ended questions. And she delivers customer service to our home care workers. After going through the coaching and some booster sessions, this was Jessie's quote, like, coaching has helped me understand that it's not about me or how I feel, but about the worker and their needs when they come see me. That's, that was a real shift for her. And Juana is one of our home care workers, which was a board member. She wrote, coaching has helped me become a better communicator. I have been given a voice at CHCA and have always used it for my coworkers and my company. I use my communication skills to handle difficult cases. I try to connect with the member and provide them with dignity and respect, which makes them come around eventually. I love the challenge of having a difficult to serve clients because I believe there is always something in our humanity that connects us. And lastly, our leadership. Our leadership. We have a big team and we may not always agree with each other. Coaching has helped us become better listeners, limit assumptions, loaded questions, and pull back on emotions and learn about our personality styles. At times, practicing these skills, they can be really challenging, and believe me, they can. But at the end, it makes us a stronger and more effective team of leaders. So thank you, guys. This is all from my portion of the webinar. Thank you. And that's all for me.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you so much. I really encourage folks, if they get to the Bronx, to try to stop by Cooperative Home Care Associates, because the culture, as you can see from the bright colors in the background and the smiles on people's faces, it's infectious, and it's a deeply empowered workplace. So thank you for sharing some of how you've made that happen, Denise. Next, we're going to turn it over to Blake Jones of Namaste Solar for a different aspect of participatory management and how it looks in his company.
So again, my name is Blake, and I'm one of the employee owners at Namaste Solar. We're an employee-owned cooperative, and as many in the audience may already know, that implies a very democratic type of ownership structure. But we're also really big into democratic and highly participatory, highly engaged operations, which is what I'm going to talk about. But to give you an idea what kind of company we are, we've been around just over a dozen years. Our revenue is between 40 and 60 million a year. We've got 4 office locations, two in Colorado, but one on each coast. And then we've got about 165 people. Our goal is for less than 25% of us to be employees, and we'd prefer for everyone to be a co-owner, as we call ourselves, or a candidate, which is somebody who's in a 1-year candidacy period, getting trained and on a path towards co-ownership. We're also a certified B corporation and a public benefit corporation, which are really big for us. And if anyone doesn't know what those are, I recommend you look them up. We're big fans of the B Corp movement, and among other things, it helps to ensure your company has a focus not just on maximizing profit for stockholders, but also providing benefits for all of your stakeholders, of which employees, of course, are one of the big ones. At our company, we have what we call a decision zone chart, or some people call it decision matrix, and it consists of 7 levels, which I'll get to in a second. It's a big Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, and while I can't show it here, half of it is governance, and we're not getting into governance today, and that's stockholder votes and board of director votes, where a lot of the high-level decision making happens. But below that governance level in operations and management, that's where we have a lot of different levels of decision making, or you could also call them forums for engagement, where the discussions happen, where the decisions happen. And this is really helpful, not just for ourselves to keep track of, here's a big decision that needs to be made, where is it going to be made, how's it going to be made, but also for new people, for candidates who are learning about our company. The Decision Zone Chart is a fantastic tool for helping them to understand how things happen, where the forums for engagement are, where you can have your voice be heard, where the decisions are made. So these are our 7 levels here. I mentioned the 2 in the governance zone are employee owners or co-owner votes and board of directors. And then below that, we've got another 5 levels. One is the big picture meeting, which I'll talk a bit about. And another one is the CEO and the other team leads. That's what we call our department heads, or maybe another company might be a management team or a leadership team. We have teams and committees. Teams consist of people who all have the same kind of job role, like the salespeople or the accountants or marketing or installers, things like that. And committees are volunteer groups of people that come together to talk about things that there's not a team for. So a good example is the facilities committee. We just moved 2 offices in the last 12 months, and the facilities committee is the one that where volunteers all engaged and participated there to vet where our future facilities are going to be, where we're going to move our office and warehouse locations. The teams and committees have significant budgets and empowerment that include charters that spell out what they can and cannot do. And the level below that is peer review. There are some decisions we can make as an individual, like salespeople are empowered to give a certain amount of discount as an individual, but if they want to make a discount that's higher than that, they have to get what's called peer review, and that's talk to at least 5 other co-owners, ideally co-owners that are not on your same team, or when you're the joke we make is when you're deciding whether or not to expense the steak dinner, you don't ask everybody else at the table who's eating the same steak dinner. You get your peer review from outside, so you can get other perspectives. So different things take place at those different forums and those different levels of decision making. But the big picture meeting is one of the most exciting. We call it a BPM. That's the acronym for short. We call them BPMs. And we vote each year on how frequently they're going to happen. They're usually all-day meetings. Sometimes they're once a month. This year we voted for them to be every other month. And it's a chance for everyone to get together and talk about the big picture issues that our company is facing, and to connect. I think there's a great value in connecting each of our individual day-to-day job roles, connecting that to the big picture of what we're trying to do, not just our mission, but also the goals that we've set for the year and other long-term issues that we have to deal with. Some examples of topics that or agenda items that we have at the BPM, we usually start with an open forum where people can, popcorn style, recognize each other. Over the last 2 months, what are some fantastic things that have happened in different parts of the company that everyone else might not be aware of? So there's a chance for positive recognition. We practice open book management. We review all the financial statements together. There are lots of questions for our finance director, reviewing how we're doing against our budget for the year. There's usually Q&A sessions with the CEO or with our different team leads to see how are we progressing, or what challenges are we experiencing, what new opportunities are coming up. And a lot of that is information sharing, but we try to balance out the information sharing with also discussions. So we have a lot of democratic debates. We have a lot of discussions. We have a lot of agenda items that are just giving people a chance to have their voice heard about an important topic. One that I mentioned earlier was moving offices. If anybody has gone through the process of moving an office, it's a pretty big deal, and it involves all of your stakeholders. So we made sure that everybody had a chance to voice their concerns, to be brought up to date, to ask questions, and to debate on different things about the budgets that we were going to spend, or the locations that we were going to look, things like that. We're also right now discussing updating our bylaws. And bylaws, on one hand, are a somewhat boring topic, but there's lots of important things in the bylaws, such as what is our stock price, what do new co-owners have to buy in at, or what's the size of our board of directors, and how many should be internal versus external. There's a lot of engagement on this particular topic, and we at BPMs where we set aside time for discussion and democratic debate about it. And then of course we have votes. So as an employee-owned cooperative, not just at the stockholder level of decision making where we're having formal stockholder votes, but also at BPMs we have co-owner votes. They're a little less formal, but they still count nonetheless, and they're one person, one vote, and we vote on lots of different things. And when these votes happen, some of them, the big picture meeting has the authority to overrule certain decisions that may have been made at a team or a committee level or a peer review level, but they also help inform decisions that the CEO is making or that the board is making, because that's a really good way for them to gather feedback and to put a finger on the pulse of what co-owners throughout the company and throughout our different offices, what they're thinking. So the topics that get discussed at BPMs are incredibly helpful for helping management steer and helping board of directors figure out which overall direction we want to go in. Another thing that it does is it provides a great brainstorming forum for getting new ideas. There are plenty of times where the CEO or a team lead will come and say, here's our strategy for addressing the Northeast market. And based on the feedback and the questions that get asked and the ideas that are generated from those BPMs, that can help that team lead to amend their strategic plan and to make it better, because they tapped into the collective brain trust of the entire company at a forum like the BPM that otherwise wouldn't have been possible. And I think I will pause there, and we can pass control on to Lin Shang.
Wonderful. Thanks, Blake, and welcome, Lin Shang.
Great, thanks. We are actually an employee-owned firm ourselves of 12 people. We are also a B Corp and a benefit corporation. And our work mostly pertains to working with nonprofits and employee-owned companies on helping them create what we like to call ownership cultures, places where people think, act, and feel like owners. And it turns out the major key for that is to engage in participatory management. So our work with our clients is really to help them develop the skills, the relationships, the structures, the practices, whereas Hillary said earlier, like where people are really able to bring out or able to bring their best to work. So what's interesting is a lot of times when our clients first come to us, they're often in a situation where maybe they've just become employee-owned or they're moving in that direction, and they haven't fully gotten the engagement yet from their staff. And they come to us and ask, well, how do you get people to think, act, and feel like owners? And the answer is simple and yet not so easy, right? You have to treat people like owners if you want them to act, think, act, and feel like owners. And we really like to share a set of building blocks that are important for creating that type of environment. And what I love about Denise and Blake's kind of case studies about their organizations is I feel like they really highlight kind of two critical aspects of thinking about building a participatory environment. I think Denise's really touches on the importance of leadership behaviors. So the idea that, you know, your organization is really your people, and the quality of people's experience there is going to be informed by the quality of relationships they have, their day-to-day interactions with their coworkers. And you really need leaders at all levels of the organizations who can act in a way that promotes shared decision-making, inclusion in decisions, information sharing, input, and coaching. Once you have that foundation or start building that foundation, there's all these other building blocks that go along with that. So I think Blake shared a lot about both participation and communication. So ways to create practices, whether that's through committees or meetings, where people really have opportunities to have major influence on what the company is doing, be involved in decisions that affect them, and also be informed of what's happening at the company. I think the other two areas we often find helpful are also education. So whether that's, you know, teaching people basic communication skills for coaching, whether that's financial literacy to understand the business, or whether that's a more targeted sort of process improvement skills for improving different aspects of work, that can also be incredibly helpful. So let me just say a couple things quickly about each of these components. So we always say leadership behaviors are foundational. So I guess to take the example of Namaste Solar, if you imagine a company like that, you could create all those decision-making structures, those meetings, the committees. But if you have leaders that are in those meetings and are acting in a way in which they're dismissive of people's ideas, you know, they're having the meeting, but maybe they're the ones who are doing all the talking, or they're being, you know, they are not actually taking the time to listen to other people, those structures are not going to work. You need the structures and you need the behaviors at the same time. And I think that Denise really touched on it when she said that this change in behavior, a lot of it is about self-management. And I think we found in our experience in leadership development is that it also involves a bit of a shift in your identity. I'm guessing that a lot of you who are on this call, you know, may have started businesses or have you know, kind of grown your business to where it is today. And maybe for a good part of your career, you were making the decisions and doing it yourself. And a lot of times that's how successful companies get started. We see that oftentimes then people need to make a shift where they're developing coaching and enabling others. So you can hear that in the kind of coaching approach to leadership, where you're empowering other people, developing other people, developing their capability. And then one step further, you're actually creating an organization where people are empowered and have influence. And with every step of that process, there's some letting go that you have to do, which isn't easy, right? if you were where you are because you were really excellent at what you did, you make really good decisions for your business, it may be hard to start letting that go and to start empowering others. So we often find that in order to make the shift, part of it is learning new skills, and part of it is also letting go and making that psychological shift where your satisfaction doesn't just come from doing it yourself or just making all the decisions yourself and succeeding, but actually seeing other people learn and make those decisions and succeed together. So I'm short on time, so let me just orient you to the remaining slides that I have. I'm not going to go over them. We often find it helpful for companies to actually spell out some competencies that they need for their company. And here are just some examples of sample competencies that companies may articulate to say, here are some expectations for leaders. This next slide also talks about some key components that can be helpful for leadership development. So everything from skill training to having learning groups where people are helping each other to actually integrating some of the leadership competencies into your hiring and performance review. And then I think the slide that's going to come after that is actually going to highlight some of the other things that people can implement in their companies to create a more participatory management environment. And I think the big message that we give people is it's a long-term process, right? You build it over time. It doesn't happen all at once. And you make regular improvements and changes. I think sometimes seeing examples like CHCA and Namaste Solar can be really inspiring, and sometimes it can also be overwhelming because your company may not be in that place. So what we tell people is that get started somewhere, right? Pick one or two practices to put into place, and this is something that we see companies build over a course of maybe 5 or 10 years. So I'm not going to go through these, but these are just some other examples of things that we've seen companies do to kind of foster education, communication, participation, and rewards in their company. So I'll wrap it up there. So pass it back to Hillary.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lin Shang. We're going to go to some discussion now. And before we do that, I just wanted everybody to be aware of some resources that'll be in the back of the slide deck that we'll email out to you after the call. The publication I mentioned, the overview and case study of New Belgium Brewing, is available on Project Equity's website, along with other recorded webinars and other publications. We have wonderful resources for the 3 companies you've heard from directly today to learn more about those companies. And in Praxis's case, there's some nice leadership development resources there. Our friends at the Democracy at Work Institute have launched something called the School for Democratic Management. And they have courses on open book management, I believe one tomorrow, and then courses over the coming months related to participatory management, strategic planning, and similar topics. And finally, for those who are interested in open book management, specifically of financial statements, which was mentioned by Blake, and is such an important part of engaging people more in understanding the whole business, where they work and how they affect it. The Great Game of Business is a wonderful method for that and a great organization. So with that, I'm going to invite all of the speakers to turn on their cameras, and I'll start a conversation. Hello, everybody. Start a conversation with the 4 of us, and hopefully with some of you as well who are listening today. So I'm going to actually start by asking a question of each of our presenters, and I'm going to start with Denise. You talked, Denise, about the communication skills and the self-management skills that you all teach in your coaching workshops. And I remember learning about something called the 4 Ps, and I had an opportunity to teach those to supervisors at the Evergreen Cooperatives a number of years ago, and often think of them myself when I work on my own communication skills. And I'm wondering if you could just briefly share with the audience what the 4 Ps are.
The 4 Ps are actually pull back. So if you're feeling like a whole sense of emotion coming on for you, remember to pull back. Paraphrase, if you're not understanding the conversation or want to really be on the same page as the other person, you need to paraphrase. Present the options. Sometimes, it may be more than just one one outcome or one solution that you have. So present the options, and sometimes you have to pass it on. The fourth P is to pass it on. You may not have the answer, so look for someone else to kind of help you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Denise. Really appreciate that. And that's some tricks we can all take home and use for our own communication: paraphrasing, pulling back, presenting options, passing it on. So now I'm going to ask a question of Blake. One of the things that we commonly hear at Project Equity as we talk to business owners and to workers and companies that are thinking about employee ownership, for example, or thinking about how to make their workplace more participatory, is a concern about wasted time or about the time intensiveness. Won't it take longer to make decisions or to work in a participatory way? And I know you have some interesting things to say about that, so I'd love you to speak to that.
Yeah, like at our own BPMs, we have co-owners who are thinking and acting like owners when they say, this is incredibly expensive to take everybody away from their day-to-day jobs and generating revenue, and instead put us all in a room to have a meeting, once every month or once every 2 months, and that is a valid concern. But we have found that qualitatively, the time spent outside of that meeting is much better spent. People are more motivated, people are more energized because they feel connected to the big picture of what we're doing at the company, because they reconnect with their fellow co-owners, they reconnect with our mission, they reconnect with our annual or quarterly goals. And that, it's hard to measure, but everyone reports that yes, they feel like they're doing better in their day-to-day jobs because they're connected to that big picture, those big picture plans, and to everybody else. Another thing is that yes, it does take longer to make decisions when you allow everyone to participate or when you encourage everyone to participate. But I think it's too narrow just to look at the amount of time that it takes to make a decision. I remember reading a long time ago a Harvard Business Review article on change management. I didn't know what change management was, but the premise of the article was, okay, your executive team has just made a decision. Now, how do you get everybody in the company to implement it or to go along with the change that you're making? And they talk about all the different tactics that you can do to get everybody on board so that they don't sandbag it, so that they don't double guess it, so that they don't complain because they think there's a better way to do it. And what we do is we do all those things before the decision is made. So we kind of put the cart before the horse, and we allow everybody to have a chance to give feedback on it. Oftentimes their ideas actually make the plan better before we implement it, so that when we're making the decision, it's informed. But also when people have had a chance to voice their concerns, even if they're in the dissenting minority, and even if they disagree with it, energetically, they're more likely to go along with that decision. They're on board with it. They feel like they were treated like owners as part of it, and they will still help to implement it. So we like to measure how long does it take to make the decision, and then how long does it take to implement. And if you look at both of those together, we think we're faster than a conventional company that might take a really short time to make the decision, but they won't implement it as thoroughly or as quickly because it takes longer to get people on board, or for them to understand the background context, or for them to stop sandbagging it, and things like that.
Got it. Great. Thank you so much, Blake. I'd like to remind folks that you can text in questions. We've received a few, and one of them I think Blake just answered. It was, does the decision matrix slow down the decision-making process significantly? So I think you just spoke to that very, very eloquently, and a good question. I'd love to ask a question of Lynn Shang, and then with our remaining time, we'll hopefully have more questions from the audience. And Lynn Shang, as you know, at Project Equity, we work with a lot of small and medium-sized business owners. It might be a 5-person company, a 20-person company, a 50-person company. And many of them have been owned by the person who founded it, or the son of or daughter of the person who founded it 40 years ago. And so there's often not very formal management structures and not a lot of formality in terms of how management is done. And I wonder what you might recommend. I think that might be the case with some folks on the call, or maybe folks on the call work with companies like that. If you were to make a recommendation to a company that you would describe that way, where would they start with participatory management? There's lots of building blocks, and is there one that you would recommend they think about first?
Great. Well, I had two reactions. One is that a 5-person company is really different from a 50-person company. So, I'd say big picture, I hate it because this is a consultant answer, but I think it really depends on where the organization is. I think maybe the two big places where we would ask first or look at first would be first to take a look at whatever the senior team or senior person is, right? It might be a one person or a couple of people in the 5-person company, likewise with the 50-person company, and really spend some time seeing, what are the skills and competencies that this group demonstrates, and what's needed for this company in order to really have that thriving participatory management culture that you're hoping to have. And identify where the strengths are, because chances are the team will have a lot of those capabilities in place already, and then look at where some of the gaps might be, where there might need to be some improvement, and to use that as the starting point to see kind of where to build things. I think the other thing too is that it's always possible to sort of survey or have focus groups or engage in meetings, the broader company, to get their input on it. I think we recently did that with a client that is trying to move towards more participatory management. They used to be family owned, and they ended up inquiring with the company to really learn about like what helped people do their best work, what were changes that they hoped the company would have, and that really helped form the basis for figuring out kind of over this next year how they're going to move more towards participatory management. So I'd say that would be the other thing.
Great. Yeah. Ask people where they'd like to start. Wonderful. Good. So we have received 5 or 6 questions, and I'm going to ask Patty to read those out now. And then we'll let the presenters answer them however you feel moved. We may not have time to get to all of them, but let's hear what the audience has been asking, Patty.
Yeah, so this question is for Denise, and it talks about what kind of topics have home care workers engaged in through coaching. And this person also asked what kind of decisions are made by the members at CHC.
Okay, what kind of topics? We stick with the home care workers. What we do is we do a 3-hour training for them, and their topics is really learning how to consciously listen. So we do active listening, we do paraphrasing, asking questions, presenting, like I mentioned before, presenting different options. And, and if they're stuck, who do they call? Do they talk to their coordinators? Do they talk to the clinical staff here? So those are kind of the topics. The other part of the question was what, Patty? I'm sorry. What was it?
What kinds of decisions are made by your membership? Mm-hmm.
Here, okay, so we operate a little bit differently because we're such a big organization. We have 2,000 home care workers, and 1,000 of the home care workers are worker owners. The decisions that they make here is actually when we do board of directors elections. They're the ones that make the decisions of electing who's going to sit on the board. It's a little bit more complicated here too, because they used to make decisions on salary and like benefits and stuff, but they're also 1199. We have a collective bargaining agreement with 1199. So there are some things that they were able to make decisions about before that they're, since we're unionized, it falls under the CBA.
And so this question is for Blake, and they're wondering if you can speak a little bit more about the peer review process and how that works.
We leave it intentionally open for different groups of people on different teams to handle it slightly differently, but it's not much more complicated than before you do this. You're not empowered to make that decision as an individual because you clearly see that you don't have that empowerment in the individual level of decision making or from your team, and as a result, you need to check in with a handful of other co-owners to do that. Sometimes we'll have folks say, okay, that was an interesting decision. Did you peer review that? And they'll say, yes, I did. Here's how I peer reviewed it with. Or sometimes I'll get an email saying, I need this decision peer reviewed, and I'm trying to get some perspectives from different teams. What does everybody think about this particular issue? It works out really, really well, even though it sounds pretty simple. But we do have in our decision zone chart, these are the types of things that need to be peer reviewed. And sometimes the answer at a peer review might be, you know what, I think you should make this decision as an individual. You don't need to bring this to a group next time. And other times it might be, I don't feel comfortable with the 5 of us making this decision. Why don't we take it to the next committee meeting or the next team meeting in order to make the decision there? And that way, all of the everybody who's on the commercial installation team is gonna weigh in on it and make that decision.
Great, thank you. Do we have time for one more question? Are we going to?
Yeah,
three?
Let's take one more. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. And so this is for Ling Shuang. Once we identify the gaps in our senior leadership, what's the next best step?
Sure. So it depends on kind of what. So we've seen different companies take on different things. I think a lot of times it can be valuable for the senior team to do some team building and leadership development together. That's really focused around the gaps that they've seen and also around kind of strengthening their connections as a team and their leadership of the company. So I think a lot of times it's worthwhile finding someone external that can be doing some leadership development with the team. The other place is to find ways for that team, this can be done by themselves, to be sharing with each other what they've learned and what each person is personally working on, and for the team to talk about kind of how are ways they can be supporting one another and holding each other accountable. And that might be something that gets built in, like that's revisited on an annual basis, so that the team is not just coming around to talk about the business, but they're also talking about, you know, how are we doing as leaders.
Wonderful. Thank you all. So it's almost noon here in California, so we're going to wrap up. I would love to just go around our screen once more and share one final thought that you might want to share, if any. And I'll share one from my end, which is that we encourage people to keep in mind that making a decision is one thing, being involved in a decision, influencing a decision, having a voice, and giving input. Those are all very important. And so it's good to be clear about which is happening. And when you seek others' input, be clear who the decision makers are, and then follow through so that people who provide input know the impact of their input and the reasons for key decisions. So that's one of my key guideposts around participatory management. Denise, Lin Shang, Blake, why don't we start with you, Denise, and we'll go to Blake and then Lin Shang if there's a final thought in 20 seconds that you'd like to share with our participants.
I think for me, it's just being committed and maintaining that commitment and sustaining whatever you decide to do within your organization. That's all.
Thanks. How about you, Blake?
I like what Lin Shang said about how you can take parts and pieces to get started on. You don't have to take a whole plan and try to implement it at once. You can start with a list of things that you want to do, a list of practices, start small, gain some success, learn from it, and then keep going. And what we've learned, especially when people come to us from other companies where they're used to doing it in a conventional way, practice makes perfect. And we often talk about the democratic muscle or the engagement muscle or different muscles. The more you do it, the easier it gets. And that's not just true at an individual level, but also at an organizational and a team level. And start small, get some success, get in shape, so to speak, build those muscles. And then, as I'm getting older, I'm learning with exercising it, use it or lose it. So the more often you're using it, the more in shape you're going to be and the better you're going to be at it. But trying to think of going from a conventional command and control situation where no input is sought to a very highly participatory way of managing, doing that in one step does seem daunting, I can understand. But if you plot out, turn it into a 100-step process and take it in a methodical, incremental approach to it, then it absolutely is doable if you're committed to it, like Denise said.
Thanks, Blake. And how about you, Lin Shang?
I guess my answer maybe builds on both Denise and Blake's response, which is have some humility and have some fun. It's a learning process and it's a long-term process, and not every step will go smoothly or perfectly, and that's okay. I think, in fact, some of the ways that you handle the mistakes, you learn from them, can be just as important for building that participatory management culture.
And one other thought too, Hillary, we didn't really talk about why. And I think there's a basic assumption that everybody thinks these practices are worthwhile, but I think there is, at the end of the day, a competitive advantage reason for it. The reason why Namaste Solar has succeeded the way that it has is because of the way we do things, the how, the participation, that everybody thinking and acting like an owner. Our quality is better, our customer service is better, our retention is better. All of these things do translate into a competitive advantage if you practice these things authentically and well.
Absolutely. That's a great place to end. And I'll just close by saying that there is data that bears that out, especially from the National Center for Employee Ownership, that shows not only that employee ownership itself, but when combined with a participatory culture and participatory management, creates much better business results. So thank you for closing on that note. And with that, thank you, Patty, for personing the controls, and thank you to everybody who participated. Have a wonderful rest of your day.